At the far edge of the galaxy, where stars were few and the darkness felt endless, a strange signal suddenly appeared on the scanners of the Xylar Dominion patrol fleet. At first, the officers thought it was just space noise. Strange signals often appeared in deep space. But when the scanners focused again, the signal became clear. It was a ship. Only one ship. The patrol fleet slowly moved closer to investigate. The massive alien warships were built for battle. Each one carried powerful weapons capable of destroying cities in seconds. But the object on their scanners looked small. Too small. The Xylar commander leaned forward in his chair as the image appeared on the main screen. A human ship, he said with surprise. Murmurs spread across the bridge. Humans were known in the galaxy, but they were still considered a young race. They had only recently begun exploring deep space. Most powerful empires saw them as curious but harmless. The commander crossed his arms. One human ship entering Xylar territory alone, he said with a quiet laugh. That is either bravery, or stupidity. The officers around him chuckled. The human vessel looked simple. Its hull was dark gray, with no visible weapons and no escort ships around it. According to the scanners, it was moving slowly through Xylar-controlled space as if it had no fear at all. A warning signal was sent immediately. This is Xylar Dominion territory. Identify yourself and stop your engines. The message traveled through the void of space. Seconds passed. Then a minute. But the human ship did not respond. Instead, it continued moving forward at the same calm speed. The commander frowned. Send the message again. Another warning was transmitted, this time stronger. Still no response. The bridge grew quiet. Something about the situation felt strange. Most ships would panic when they saw a Xylar patrol fleet. Even powerful alien traders would immediately answer the call. But this human ship acted like the fleet wasn't even there. The scanners ran another deep scan. Commander, one officer said slowly, the ship has very low weapon signatures. So it is harmless, the commander replied. But the officer hesitated. There is something strange. The commander looked at him. Speak. The ship's power readings do not match its size. The bridge became silent again. Explain, the commander ordered. The officer zoomed in on the energy display. The reactor output is extremely high. Higher than most military vessels. But the energy is not going to weapons, or shields. The commander stared at the screen. Then where is it going? The officer shook his head. We cannot tell. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside the viewports, the small human ship continued moving through space like a quiet shadow. The commander finally gave an order. Launch interceptor ships. Bring the human vessel in for capture. Several Xylar fighters immediately left the hangars and moved toward the lone ship. To the Xylar fleet, this was nothing more than a routine operation. One small human ship would not cause trouble. But inside that silent vessel, things looked very different. The human ship's bridge was calm. Lights glowed softly across the control panels. The crew moved quietly, watching their screens without panic. At the center of the bridge stood the ship's captain. Captain Elias Kane. He was a tall man with calm eyes and a steady expression. He watched the alien fleet on the main display as if he had expected them all along. One of the officers spoke carefully. Captain. Xylar interceptors are approaching. They will reach us in 3 minutes. Kane nodded slowly. Good. The officer looked confused. Sir, they are preparing to capture us. The captain's lips curved slightly into a faint smile. Yes, he said quietly. That is exactly what we want. Another officer checked a different screen. Signal network is ready, Captain. Good, Kane replied. He stepped closer to the main window and looked out at the endless stars. Across the galaxy, hidden in the darkness of space, thousands of silent machines waited. Old satellites. Lost probes. Forgotten stations. Devices that had been quietly placed there for years. Waiting. Sleeping. Watching. The Xylar fleet believed they were about to capture one lonely human ship. They believed this was a simple mistake. They had no idea that the ship drifting quietly in front of them should never have existed. And in exactly 3 minutes, the entire galaxy was about to notice why. The Xylar interceptors moved through space like sharp blades cutting through darkness. Their engines glowed bright blue as they rushed toward the lone human ship. From the bridge of the Xylar flagship, Commander Vark watched the screen with calm confidence. "Lock their engines," he ordered. "Disable the ship. I want the human crew alive." The officers quickly followed the command. Targeting systems focused on the small vessel drifting quietly ahead of them. To the Xylar fleet, it looked harmless. Too harmless. But something about the situation still felt strange. The human ship had not tried to escape. It had not raised shields. It had not even answered their warnings. It simply floated there, waiting. "Commander," one officer said carefully, "interceptors will reach the target in 60 seconds. Vark nodded. "Good. Let us see what foolish human decided to enter our territory alone." On the other side of the empty void, the small human vessel remained perfectly calm. Inside the bridge, Captain Elias Kane watched the approaching alien fighters on his display. Tiny red icons moved closer every second. His crew remained quiet, focused on their stations. No fear. No panic. Just quiet preparation. "Interceptor distance?" Kane asked. 40 seconds, a crew member replied. Another officer looked up from his console. "Signal network status?" "All nodes ready, Captain." Kane nodded slowly. For years, humans had been preparing for this moment. Not for war. For balance. He turned his eyes toward the star map glowing on the screen. Across hundreds of systems, small hidden markers were waiting for activation. Machines the galaxy had ignored. Machines the Xylar Dominion never noticed. But now, they were ready. 30 seconds, the officer said. The alien interceptors were close enough now that their shapes appeared clearly on the screen. Sharp. Fast. Deadly. "Commander," the Xylar sensor officer said, "the human ship still shows no weapon activity." Vark smiled. "Of course not. Humans know when they are defeated." But at that exact moment, something unexpected happened. The human ship suddenly powered down. Its engines shut off. Its lights dimmed. From the Xylar scanners, it looked like the ship had surrendered. The bridge of the flagship filled with quiet laughter. "They gave up," one officer said. "Typical humans." Commander Vark leaned back in his chair. "Bring them aboard once the interceptors secure the vessel." But deep inside the human ship, Captain Kane gave a quiet command. "Activate the signal." One crew member pressed a single button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the signal left the ship. It was not a weapon. It was not a distress call. It was simply a quiet transmission that spread through space faster than any ship could travel. Across the galaxy, something began to wake up. An abandoned satellite orbiting a cold moon suddenly powered on. A forgotten probe drifting near a dying star activated its systems. Hidden devices buried inside asteroid belts opened their long silent receivers. One by one, thousands of machines came online. Back in the Xylar system, the interceptors were seconds away from reaching the human ship. Then alarms exploded across the Xylar flagship. "Commander," a sensor officer shouted. Vark snapped upright. "What is it?" "Energy spikes detected." "Where?" The officer stared at his screen in confusion. Everywhere. At that exact moment, 3 Xylar warships suddenly lost power. Their engines shut down instantly. Weapons went offline. Their massive vessels drifted helplessly through space. Impossible, another officer yelled. More alarms screamed across the bridge. 5 more ships suddenly lost control. Navigation systems failed. Communication channels collapsed. The entire fleet was being hit by something they could not see. Commander Vark slammed his fist onto the console. What weapon is this? But the scanners showed nothing. No missiles. No lasers. No attack ships. Just one quiet human vessel drifting silently in front of them. Inside that ship, Captain Kane watched the chaos unfold across his display. More red signals were disappearing from the map. He folded his hands behind his back. Phase 1, he said calmly. Complete. The crew looked at the screen in silence as the Xylar fleet began to panic. But Kane's expression remained serious. Because what had just happened was only the beginning. And very soon, the entire galaxy would feel the consequences of one small human signal. The Xylar flagship had never been so loud. Alarms screamed from every console. Red lights flashed across the bridge as system after system began to fail. Commander. We are losing control of the outer fleet. Navigation systems are offline. Communication signals are collapsing across the sector. Commander Vark stood frozen for a moment, staring at the chaotic screens. Just minutes ago, his fleet had been perfectly organized. Now ships were drifting helplessly in space. What attacked us? He demanded. The sensor officer shook his head. There are no enemy weapons detected. That is impossible. Another officer spoke quickly. Power relays on multiple ships have been shut down remotely. Something is interfering with our systems. From where? Vark asked angrily. The officer hesitated. Then he slowly pointed at the display. The small human ship. The entire bridge fell silent. That vessel has no visible weapons, the officer said quietly. But every disruption began seconds after it sent a signal. Commander Vark's eyes narrowed. A signal, he repeated. At that moment, another warship suddenly lost control. Its engines died instantly, leaving the massive vessel floating helplessly in the void. More warnings appeared across the screens. Entire sections of the Xylar fleet were shutting down one by one. The interceptors that had been approaching the human ship suddenly lost their targeting systems. Their pilots shouted in confusion. Controls are not responding. We cannot fire. We are drifting. The powerful Xylar fighters, once deadly hunters, now floated like broken machines. On the bridge of the small human vessel, the atmosphere was completely different. Quiet. Controlled. The crew watched the displays carefully as the signals spread across the sector. Captain Elias Kane stood beside the central console, studying the star map. One by one, small green lights began appearing across the map. Each light represented something hidden. Something that had been sleeping for years. A communications officer spoke softly. Captain, first wave of nodes has activated successfully. Good, Kane replied calmly. Another officer checked a different screen. Network connection spreading across neighboring systems. The star map slowly filled with more green signals. Each one meant another device had awakened. Hidden satellites. Deep space probes. Maintenance drones. Tiny machines that had been quietly placed across the galaxy over decades. To most alien empires, they looked like harmless scientific equipment. But they were never just probes. They were part of a network. A silent system designed by humans long ago. And now the system was alive. Back on the Xylar flagship, panic was spreading. Commander, the sensor officer shouted again. Reports are coming from nearby systems. What reports? Vark demanded. Ships across the region are experiencing the same failures. Another officer added quickly, trade stations, defense platforms, even communication relays are shutting down. Commander Vark felt a cold weight settle in his chest. This was not a simple attack. It was something much bigger. Trace the signal, he ordered. The officers tried desperately to locate the source. But every scan returned the same result. The signal had already spread too far. Across star systems. Across trade routes. Across the empty spaces between empires. And everywhere the signal reached, machines were waking up. Inside forgotten asteroid fields, old satellites opened their antennas. On distant moons, silent listening posts powered on. In the dark space between stars, drifting probes activated hidden transmitters. The network was expanding rapidly. Far beyond the Xylar territory. Far beyond this single fleet. Inside the human ship, Captain Kane looked at the growing map. Status report, he said. Signal propagation successful, the officer answered. Network activation spreading exactly as predicted. Kane nodded once. Good. One crew member looked up with curiosity. Captain, the Xylar fleet is completely confused. They have no idea what is happening. Kane allowed himself a small smile. That is the advantage of patience. The officer tilted his head slightly. Sir. Kane looked back at the star map. For 30 years, he said quietly, humans have been placing pieces of this network across the galaxy. He pointed at the glowing lights. Most empires thought we were just exploring. Another officer added softly, they ignored us. Yes, Kane said. They ignored us. Outside the ship, the once powerful Xylar fleet was slowly losing control. Warships that once ruled the region were now powerless. And all of it had started with one simple signal. But Captain Kane knew the truth. This was only the opening move. Because the network had just awakened. And very soon. The entire galaxy would realize that the chaos spreading through their systems was not an accident. It was human design. Across the galaxy, confusion was turning into fear. Messages rushed between star systems faster than ever before. Emergency signals flooded communication networks as fleets reported the same terrifying problem. Ships were failing. Defense stations were shutting down. Navigation systems were breaking without warning. And no one understood why. At the center of the Galactic Council, representatives from dozens of alien civilizations gathered in a massive chamber floating above a bright blue world. The meeting had started as a normal diplomatic discussion. But within minutes, everything changed. An emergency transmission appeared in the center of the chamber. A Xylar officer spoke quickly, his voice shaking. Our fleets are under attack. Entire systems are losing control of their technology. The council members began shouting at once. Who is attacking you? Which empire is responsible? Is this a new weapon? The Xylar officer hesitated. Then he answered with disbelief. We believe it started with one human ship. The chamber suddenly went silent. Many council members stared at each other. Some even laughed. One human ship, one alien senator said. That is impossible. Another representative shook his head. Humans do not have that level of technology. But new transmissions kept arriving. Reports from trade routes. Reports from border fleets. Reports from distant colonies. Every message repeated the same terrifying detail. Systems were failing, and it had begun after a strange signal spread across the galaxy. Back near Xylar territory, Commander Vark was still struggling to regain control of his fleet. His warships drifted helplessly in space, their powerful weapons useless. Restore the systems, he shouted. "We are trying, Commander," an officer replied. "Something is locking our control networks." "Break the lock." "We cannot." Another alarm suddenly rang out. "Commander, more signals detected." Vark turned sharply. "What kind of signals?" The sensor officer zoomed in on the map. Dozens of small energy readings were appearing across the system. Then hundreds. "These readings, they are not ships," the officer said slowly. "Then what are they?" The officer enlarged one of the signals. The image appeared on the main screen. A tiny object floated quietly near an asteroid belt. It looked like an old communication satellite. But now it was glowing with energy. "Commander," the officer whispered, "these devices are everywhere." Another screen lit up. More satellites. More probes. More hidden machines waking up across the system. And they were all connected to the same signal. Commander Vark suddenly understood something terrible. "This is not an attack fleet," he said quietly. "This is a network." Meanwhile, inside the small human ship, Captain Elias Kane watched the galaxy slowly react. The star map in front of him was now covered in glowing lights. Every light meant another node had activated. The system was spreading exactly as planned. A communications officer spoke from his station. "Captain, reports from nearby sectors confirm major system disruptions across Xylar territory." "Expected," Kane replied calmly. Another officer looked up. "The Galactic Council has begun emergency meetings." Kane nodded slightly. They were always going to notice eventually. One crew member leaned forward. "Captain, are we starting the second phase?" Kane looked out at the endless stars beyond the ship's window. For decades, humans had watched the galaxy carefully. They had seen powerful empires grow arrogant. They had seen smaller worlds suffer under unfair control. They had seen trade routes manipulated and weaker species ignored. Humans had learned something important. Direct war would never fix the galaxy. But control of the system. That could change everything. Kane turned back toward his crew. "Prepare Phase 2. The officers quickly began working. Network synchronization starting. Signal expansion confirmed. Additional nodes activating across outer sectors. Far away, more hidden machines powered on. On lonely moons. Inside asteroid fields. Drifting silently between stars. Thousands of forgotten human devices were now awake. Each one connecting to the next. Each one expanding the network further. Back on the Xylar flagship, Commander Vark watched the growing signals appear across his map. His powerful empire was slowly losing control of its own territory. And the worst part. He still could not see the enemy. Because the true weapon was never the ship. It was the invisible web spreading across the galaxy. A web humans had been building for years. And now that web was tightening. Slowly. Quietly. Until the entire galaxy would finally realize something terrifying. This was not a sudden attack. This was a war. That humans had already been winning for decades. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Entire fleets were standing still in space, unable to move. Defense platforms that once guarded powerful empires were suddenly silent. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were collapsing within hours. And everywhere the same question was being asked. What had humans done? Inside the Galactic Council chamber, chaos filled the air. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations argued loudly while new reports continued arriving every minute. Xylar warships are completely disabled in multiple sectors. Outer colonies report their defense networks are shutting down. Communication grids are being controlled by unknown systems. A tall silver-skinned council member slammed his hand on the table. This cannot be possible. Humans do not control this much technology. But another representative slowly stood. You are wrong, she said quietly. The chamber turned toward her. For years, she continued, humans have been traveling across the galaxy. They placed communication satellites, exploration probes, maintenance drones. She paused before finishing her sentence. And none of us ever cared. Silence spread across the room. They all remembered. Human technology had always been everywhere. Small machines drifting in deep space. Quiet probes studying distant stars. Every empire had ignored them. Because they seemed harmless. But now the truth was slowly becoming clear. Those machines had never been random. They had been pieces. Pieces of something much bigger. Far away from the council chamber, the Xylar capital system was now on full alert. Thousands of warships surrounded their homeworld. Massive defense cannons pointed toward open space. Planetary shields glowed around their cities. The Empire was preparing for invasion. But when the long-range scanners finally detected the approaching ship, confusion spread across the command center. That cannot be correct, the sensor officer said. The Xylar Emperor stepped forward. What is it? The officer swallowed. There is only one ship approaching the system. The Emperor frowned. One. Yes, Your Majesty. The massive screen displayed the image. A small human vessel moving slowly through space. The exact same ship that had started the chaos. Inside the ship, Captain Elias Kane calmly studied the capital system. The Xylar homeworld was beautiful from space. Oceans reflected the light of their sun while massive cities covered entire continents. But Kane was not here to destroy it. He pressed a button on the console. Across the network, thousands of hidden devices responded instantly. Satellites around the Xylar capital suddenly activated. Old maintenance drones connected to the signal. Even forgotten navigation buoys joined the network. Within seconds, the system's control grid was completely surrounded. Back on the Xylar command center, alarms suddenly exploded across every screen. Power failure in orbital defense cannons. Navigation control lost on fleet sectors. Shield network malfunction. One by one, the massive warships around the planet lost their systems. Weapons powered down. Engines shut off. Targeting computers went dark. Thousands of ships that once defended the capital were now frozen in space. The Xylar Emperor stared at the screens in disbelief. All systems, disabled, he whispered. The officer nodded slowly. Yes, Your Majesty. In orbit above the system, the small human ship continued drifting calmly. Then a communication signal appeared on the Xylar command screen. An unknown channel. The Emperor hesitated before accepting it. The face of Captain Elias Kane appeared. He looked calm. Almost peaceful. The Emperor glared at him. You have attacked our empire, he said angrily. Kane shook his head slightly. No, he replied. I stopped your control. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. You could destroy us right now. Yes, Kane said simply. The room became silent. The Emperor leaned forward. Then why haven't you? For a moment, Kane did not answer. Then he spoke quietly. Because humans do not want to rule the galaxy. The Emperor looked confused. Then what do you want? Kane's voice remained calm. Balance. Behind him, the network of human technology continued glowing across the galaxy. Trade systems were reconnecting. Communication routes were stabilizing. Small worlds that had once been ignored were gaining access to the same networks as powerful empires. The galaxy was changing. Not through destruction. But through control of the systems that connected everything. The Emperor slowly realized the truth. The war had never been about ships. It had never been about weapons. Humans had fought a different kind of battle. A silent one. And they had already won. Kane looked directly at the Emperor. The galaxy thought humans were weak, he said quietly. But humans are patient. Far across the stars, the network continued expanding. And for the first time, the galaxy finally understood something important. The most dangerous power in the universe was not strength. It was patience. And humans had more of it than anyone else.